Okay, here we go. Hey everybody, my name's John, and I took a painting class one time. Yeah, seriously, I did. My friend, she invited me, so we went, and while the class was going on, as the students were painting, the teacher, she went over the history of Western art and Western painting, and I found it really interesting, and here's how I'm kind of misremembering it. It's basically like the old masters back in the day. Your Da Vinci's and your Michelangelos, anyone who had a Ninja Turtle named after them. They worked under a lot of constraints. Canvas and brushes, their materials were really expensive. To get into it, you had to be apprenticed to a master and kind of learn over a long time. Some colors, they all had to come from natural elements. So green and brown were easy, cheap colors to come by. Blue was a harder, more expensive color to come by. And so that went on for centuries until the Industrial Revolution, when we could mass produce canvases and brushes, and those all got cheaper. And blue's now the same price as green and brown. So now almost everybody could paint. And so what people did is they analyzed what the old masters did, and they produced books. And it's like, this is how Da Vinci and Michelangelo painted, so this is how you paint. And that grew into university degrees and master's degrees and PhDs, where people went to school and they were like, this is how the masters painted, this is how you paint. And what was kind of lost was a lot of the creative energy that the old masters had because of their constraints. And there might have been some few outliers, Van Gogh, Monet, Picasso, who would kind of disrupt things for a while, but then they would be brought into the fold. They would be analyzed and codified and be like, this is how you paint like Picasso, so that's how people painted. Then, when the Cold War ended and the Iron Curtain fell and there's more exchange between East and West, they found all these beautiful, amazing paintings in former Soviet states and countries like China. And when kind of asking why, how did these artists accomplish this? And it's determined they never got the textbook. They never had access to the degree. They had to keep working within constraints and be creative. And so I've spent 3 minutes of my lightning talk going over the history of art, because what I realized, I was game design as a craft has kind of experienced that same history in a much accelerated timeline, has it not? And then I thought, are we not, right now, as I speak here today, in the worst part of that over-codification process? I've played 3 AAA games in the past year: Horizon Forbidden West, Hogwarts Legacy, and Gotham Knights. I don't know if y'all know them. I'm going to say something controversial. I may get kicked out of this group. They're all the same game. They're the same damn game. They're an open world list of video game chores with a bunch of fetch quests, and the stories for the fetch quest are written a certain way. And for the first 2 games, those were great games. I thought they were all right. But if you've not heard about Gotham Knights, it got panned critically, and I think deservedly so. And it's just like a game I was playing, I was like, these people just followed the textbook. The Arkham games, the Batman games, they thought, what's the Batman experience like? He patrols the city, he beats up criminals, and I think their game sort of came from that. What is the experience? Well, with Gotham Knights, it's we need the open world, we need the skill tree, we need the loot, and this is how it's all going to go. Very much by the book, what other games are doing. So, with my last minute of my lightning talk, I wanted to ask, if we are in the over-codified peak right now, where people are just watching online videos and getting degrees and just making games based on the rules, who's going to be the Picassos and the Van Goghs and the Monets? Who isn't? It's us. It's the indies. Why is it the indies? Because we have the constraints. We don't have the budget and the artist and all that. We've got the constraints. We've got to get creative to work around those constraints, and it's up to us to disrupt things. So I wanted to encourage everybody in this group. I've actually got 40 seconds. So, yeah. And we had Let's Revolution just came out. Leaping Lads will come out someday. Yes. I think someday. And that'll be your Monets, Picassos, and Van Goghs, and everything like that.
Does everybody know what time it is?
Tool time!
All right, so if you guys have worked on a game, you've probably used tools to work on the game. Text editors, IDEs, level editors, the art software, pen and paper. Those are tools. Tools make our lives easier. Our lives would suck without tools. What does a tool do for us? A good tool, okay? It makes things faster a lot of the times. So like a power screwdriver, you can screw in screws faster, right? Try doing it without one, it sucks. Keyboard lets you put words down faster, and it makes editing your words faster. So that's really great. So it makes things faster. You can also it can make things less taxing. So wheelbarrow, these things are crazy. So like you can put stuff in the wheelbarrow and push it, and it requires less energy than if you were going to carry it, which is crazy. It makes no sense. Calendars, okay? It reduces the mental load. Suddenly you don't have to remember to pick your kid up from school and all that crap. Anyway, so it makes things less taxing. Sometimes you're using the wrong tool for the job, okay? You got a can opener, or you have can openers, but you're like, I don't have one, so I'm going to use a freaking hammer. It takes too long. You're going to cut yourself. It's stupid. You're going to hate it. So what do? You don't use that because you're not going to want to make dinner anymore. So if you're making a video game, you've probably got your own specific set of problems for your game. And nobody's made tools to fix them because your game is your game and it's unique. So what I want to tell you is that if you can make a video game, you can make tools. So I want to show you 3 tools that I made for my game Leap and Lads that have sped up development. The first is the weight designer. So I've got my game's randomly generated, and the level generator has to decide what to spawn. And then you have these like weight fields, and to manually adjust them, like here in the text editor, sucks. And I was doing that for a while, and I hated it. So I'm going to show you what I came up with to make that better. This is the weight designer. Okay, we've got a list. We've got a visual representation of our probabilities here at the bottom, and I can resize them, grow them, shrink them. I can do a multi-selection, work in bulk, and I can even them out with a keystroke. And that made, making the levels stuff show up a lot better. Okay, so that's one thing. Second thing I want to show is called the ruler. Okay, before I was taking screenshots of my game and then putting it in an image editor, then measuring it with the selection tool, and that was stupid, so I made the ruler. And it took me a long time to realize that it was stupid. So you can measure stuff, and then it prints it out in the terminal there. Okay, that's that thing. The third thing I want to show is called the seed browser. Now, when it's generating a level, it's based on a seed, which is like a random number. And every time the level's random, but let's say I want to work on a specific thing that's generated. If I want to play it multiple times, I'm kind of at the mercy of the level generator. So what I made is the seed browser. And it's this interface that lists like a history of all the levels that have been generated. And so if I get to this point, I hit Control B if I want to play it again. And then I can go back here to that exact point and just play it over and over. And then I can go to different parts, like I saved this part that was generated once. I can jump around here. I can go to this piano. I can try and play a scale. There's no sound. Forgot to get the sound working, but yeah. So that's a seed browser. It lets me jump around to different levels that have been generated at specific points. And you might be saying, Corey, that's way too fancy for some crap that your players are never going to see. And I say that's a good point, but I think there's something to be said about making your tools nice, because it makes working on your game a lot more enjoyable. You're not going to dread doing all this crap, because you've got this cool interface with a slideshow, and it's it makes me feel good. So I just want to say that's an eyeball. You should be attentive. Learn to recognize inefficiencies in your development process and see where you can make tools. But be careful not to make tools that are not going to make your life easier, because that's a waste of time. But overall, what I want to leave you with, I'm out of time, is a very powerful tool that you have in your toolbox is the ability to make tools. Thank you.
All right. Hello, I'm Morgan, and I'm another teenager who thinks that they can make a massive scale, super complex, really long JRPG and narrative-driven thing. In all honesty, I think that like the planning and stuff is more important to me right now than thinking I can finish something. And I think the more I do that, the more I can analyze how my mind processes, new creative solutions to different problems and what I want to make. So with all that, big blob JRPG craziness, mash that up with medieval economics, and that's what I want to make. Been interested in medieval economics for a while. I think a game based on a traveling merchant, buying low, selling high, is a lot of potential. A lot of games I've looked up that utilize something like that are all end up simulations, though. And I think it's kind of, simulation fans, a little bit of waste potential for this concept. So what this talk is about is developing a game based off of what you don't want it to be. So number one, I do not want it to be a simulation. And how I do that is essentially, with this in-game economy, this is driven by the story, not driven by the player. The player the main character, interacts with the economy. It's kind of like a puzzle game. He can buy and sell at different locations. But it's the game story that advances and changes the new situation, right? So think of it like this. Kind of like Dragon Quest, where there's like multiple different villages and towns, and they each have their own subplot kind of thing. So when you interact with the town, the more you go along its subplot, it might change the economic landscape of that place. It's like, I'm already in there. I'm going to move on. And then that, however, leads to, with the whole town thing, my problem point number 2. Well, I solved the first one, but it brings up a new problem. I don't want the player to have agency over time on a macro scale. If you're going from place to place, it's like, I'm actually going to do it like this. What's your name? Caleb, right. Caleb represents the town. That's like the main story beat, like the next main story beat. Everyone else here also represents towns that are like smaller scale, etc. If the player goes from like multiple people back and forth, like in this game, it's going to be like weeks, months for that to happen. I do not want dynamic seasons or whatever. It's going to screw up subplots that are based on like harvests and all that. So how can I make it so that it doesn't take forever in game? Not real time, of course. And so, of course, I came up with the concept of the main character is part of a pagan group of people who can access the subdimension called ley lines, where they can go between places really quickly in like an hour or so. And so this is gifted to them by the gods, of course. Anyways, in short, that's like a fast travel kind of thing, but giving it a plot reason. And now that I came up with that plot reason of like populated places, there's like the subdimension you can go across that have monsters in it, so I can check off that JRPG box. It invites a new whole thing of how does that impact the world at large if there's a certain group of people who are able to essentially fast travel. And maybe morbidly enough, my mind initially just went straight to like indentured servitude, like almost slavery essentially, of using these people as like mules to get things from place to place. And so that's now part of the plot and part of the main backstory of the game. The main character has that ability. And so that's number 2. It's like an example of how that fosters creativity, not like what I don't want it to be. But number 3, I don't want it to be a stealth game, because if there are organizations and guilds that are like have monopolies and stuff by working these people, and the main character is one of the people, like how is that going to work out with like the main character not falling into that? So I had to come up with new rules for that. Where in the ley lines, there's usually people who accompany the people who use them. And those people will get sick if they stay in it for more than a couple hours. So the people who are like slavers use these people for like servitude are more clustered around areas with closer towns and closer villages, so they don't get sick in the fast travel. And that also adds a new theme of like overpopulation maybe. So it's kind of like creative solutions to things. So now with that idea, all of those themes are still there. The ideas are still in place, but it doesn't impact the gameplay as much. Or it's not like, oh no, I'm going to go to this place, and then it's like you have to plan around not being seen, all of your stuff not being tracked. It goes back to my simulation thing. I just don't want simulated elements like that. And so those are the 3, or like an overview of like 3 different processes I went through of like, I've come to this new conclusion. What is it in there that I don't like? What do I not want the player to do? And I feel like it's a lot better than just like in Pokemon slapping a dude who's like investigating Rattata footprints and you can't walk along the route or pass him or anything. So that's that.
So I'm Caleb. I'm a PhD candidate studying artificial intelligence.
So that means two things. My talk's going to be a lot more academic than the last few, so hopefully I don't bore you in 5 minutes. And I'm going to attempt to get a couple of things that I know about AI out to you. So I'm going to talk about two techniques for game AI. The first is finite state machines. These have been around for a long time, at least since 1955, but they were first popularized for video game AI by Valve's Half-Life in 1998. And they remained kind of the de facto standard until mid-2000s, so about 10 years. Each individual behavior think things like walk, jump, run, things like that. Each individual behavior is a state, and transitions between those different states are based off of world events. So your easy example of this is Pac-Man, the ghosts in Pac-Man. You have two states. They can either chase the player or run away from the player. And those transitions are based off of whether a power pellet has been eaten. So if the Pac-Man eats a power pellet, the ghosts transition from chase player to run away, and if the power pellet expires, they transition back. Now, finite state machines have several advantages, the main one being they're very, very easy to implement. They're also extremely well understood. You can actually do formal proofs about finite state machines if you're into that kind of thing. And they exist in most game engines out of the box, which is really, really nice. If you've ever used the animator in Unity, then you've built a finite state machine before. There also exist several extensions to mitigate kind of the problems, such as hierarchical finite state machines and lots of other things. And they're still widely used today. As recently as 2016, in the newest Doom, used finite state machines for the main AI. Disadvantages, they're labor intensive to build comprehensively. So Pac-Man's a really simple example, but you can imagine as you get more complex behaviors, the number of states goes up and the number of transitions that you have to build goes up exponentially. And that means they don't necessarily scale well to really complex AI. And that they're somewhat computationally expensive. So the next technique mitigates some of those problems. The next technique is behavior trees. These were first popularized in 2004 by Halo 2, and they're kind of still the de facto standard today. Behaviors are laid out in a tree structure, a DAG for those CS folks, that has one root node that's the start of the behavior tree, and a bunch of leaf nodes that represent behaviors, which again are things like move, shoot, talk, jump, things like that. And then in between the root and the leaf, there's a bunch of composite nodes that give logic for which leaf, which behavior to select. There's two types of composite nodes, a selector node, think of that like an if-then condition, and a sequence node, which executes a set of behaviors in order. And then finally, there's decorator nodes, which are a little less commonly used, but they tend to manipulate logic. So they do things like and, or not. So let's look at a quick example. This is something you might implement for a shooter, right? You have a root node, and then you go into a selector that says, if the current enemy is under fire, then we do a sequence of behaviors where we run to the closest cover, we get inside that cover, and then we blind fire at the player. On the other hand, if they're not under fire, then they're going to check and see if they're in melee range of the player. If they are, they're going to do a melee attack. If they're not, they're going to fire a long-range weapon attack. Pretty simple behavior, but you could see how easily you could expand this tree to include more kinds of things. And this has a lot of advantages, which is why it's still used today. It's more adaptive and proactive than alternatives. It computationally scales really well, both in terms of the design and the actual computational complexity. It's also very easy to visualize that tree structure and debug it, which makes it really nice for designers. And it's very modular, so you could write a leaf node for shooting that you could reuse between a bunch of different enemy types. There are some disadvantages though. It has a large computational overhead for simple behaviors, so if you're designing a simple AI, you probably want to go with something else. And unfortunately, many game engines don't have an out-of-the-box implementation. There are third-party tools that exist, but Unreal is the only one I know of that has an out-of-the-box behavior tree implementation. So a couple closing thoughts. These are, of course, only two of the very many types of AIs that you can use, but they're probably the two most commonly used for character AI, at least. For simple projects and simple AI behaviors, I suggest FSMs. And for more complex behaviors, you might want to try out behavior trees. And if you need a consultation on AI for your game, you can find me on socials.
All right, my name is Andrew. I am a music composer. I mainly write custom music, but I also write music for music packs. I got one in the Unity Asset Store, and Unreal is on all those places. You essentially create it, and then you download the game engine and put it into folders and name it a certain way so that it's formatted so that when somebody buys it, it just downloads directly into their Unity engine or Unreal, whatever they're using. And they can just drag it and drop it into their game, which is really cool. The thing I like about game music is you get to make a song, but then you get to make different stems that work together in different ways. Because a lot of times when you make a song and you solo like 2 different parts, you're like, oh, this sounds really cool together, but nobody's ever gonna hear it that way. But in a game, it's possible because maybe, at nighttime, or maybe if you walk in a house, you only hear those 2 stems, and you walk outside, you hear like the whole full melody. So this is a song, a new one that is not quite finished, but almost. The working title is called Really Peaceful Town. I played guitar and flutes, and then I hired a cellist to play on it. So hear that. But this is just a simple, this part is just guitar and piano, and then there's another stem that has the strings and the flutes and things on it, just so you can kind of hear like how it works. So it's kind of a simple thing, you gotta imagine, you have sound effects, you're doing things, it's the perfect kind of like background kind of vibe. And there is variation, like verse, chorus, different like segments of it. So you hear the strings and the flutes. So it's more of an ambient type thing. The cool thing is you could use either one, and then of course you can use them together. But yeah, just a simple example of like what I do basically. So, but yeah, it's really cool. Anybody in here could make assets and put them on one of the stores if that's what you wanted to do. A lot of this song will go on there, but a lot of stuff that I did was things that were half finished that I went ahead and finished, or were just unused. Like I made for another project, and it said, oh, this is not what we want exactly. It's kind of a way to make something from what I already had. So it's a great little, just extra little piece of revenue. So, but yeah, that's what I got.
Hey everyone, so I'm here to show off some work that I'm working on a VR game that I'm kind of got an idea for. But the software and basically the software that I'm going to be using or are using is Blender, and I'm using GIMP as well. So this started off as a cube, of course. When you open up Blender, first of all, if anybody doesn't know what Blender is, it's a free open source program. It's all-in-one. You can design, you can animate, you can render, you can do lighting, you can do video editing in there as well. You just almost do whatever you want, create assets and everything. So, again, going back, it's September 27th. I had this idea of just coming up with a game, VR game, and I opened up the program. Of course, it starts with a cube. And from there, I extended from that cube, and I used the camera inside of there to just kind of get a view of what it looks like inside of there. And you can connect a VR camera or a VR headset into the program, and it will make this camera here move in real time, and it'll be a viewer, just a viewer only. You can also move using the controllers using the controllers in the VR headset to move around in this scene. So, anyways, what started from this was like every day's for me. So every day for about 5 minutes, I would just start on something. I was like, okay, it's a kitchen, but it needs certain things like the floor deals here, and then I just would quit and then come back the next day and then do other things. Just every day for about 5 minutes, even like maybe even longer than that, because I didn't have anything else to do. So I'd be sitting at my desk doing these things, just doing more stuff. And it led from that to this, because I didn't even know, as I've used Blender, I've never known how to texture. And I just watched a couple of tutorials on how to texture, and was able to drop floor tile and the colors in the scene as well. You can see all this stuff in the collections window. Also added some detail and some extra items in the scene. You can kind of see that. And then came a point in time where I was like, well, I'm ready to put this whole thing into Unity. And when I tried to do that, it was broken. A lot of if not all of it was broken, some of it was broken. Like, it was crazy frustrating. This is some more stuff. But so I think I just kind of took a deep breath and backed up and was like, let me start over from like zero almost. Like, start from the very beginning. And there was a game meet last night or yesterday where we all met, and that's what I said, well, let me just create something simple and bring it in and see what happens. It was this simple street light. There's no colors, no textures, just some simple details like cube, cylinder, whatnot. But it's all under this cylinder node here. I can like hide it and it will go away. I said, okay, let me just drag it into Unity and see what happens. And when I did that, so how you do that is you export it as an FBX, and that's what I was doing with my previous project. Yeah. Anyways, in conclusion, slow down, take your time, and it might work out well. Yeah, just take your time. But this was it. A simple street light in Blender, no difficult stuff. I just brought it in same way, FBX import, FBX export, and here it is here in Unity. It looks good.
All right, let's start. So, hey everyone, my name is Nick Pettit. I'm the lead Unity developer at this company called Buck. It's an Emmy Award-winning design and animation studio based in LA, New York, Sydney, Amsterdam, and London. And we just released a game called Let's Revolution on Steam for PC and Mac, and it's gotten some pretty good reviews, which we're very pleased about. But one of the things that is really, really hard when you're releasing a game is getting people to notice it. I mean, it's hard to make a game, it's hard to release a game,
and it's hard to release a good game, and it's really, really hard to release a good game that people know about. And so, so there's this account on Twitter, or X or whatever, and it's called What's on Steam. And if you just scroll through here, it takes forever. So this is an account that tweets every single game that comes out on Steam, just as it releases. And if you just scroll down here, it takes forever just to get to yesterday. So there's so much stuff that just gets dumped onto Steam, and it's really, really difficult. Oops, sorry. It's really, really difficult, breaking the rules here, to get something that people are gonna notice. How do you get into the Steam algorithm? How do you get people to buy your game? So we got about 10,000 wish lists in 2 weeks. So Steam wish lists are when people basically add your game to their wish list, and when you release your game or when it goes on sale, they get an email, and that's one of the greatest ways to get in front of people on Steam. And it's also a great way to get into the algorithm of Steam, where as you get more and more wish lists, or you get people to follow your game or buy your game or write reviews, it will show up in more and more places on people's Steam page when they log in. So basically, the way we did, because this was a really difficult time to be doing that. Reddit was closing down their third-party API, and they were shutting down subreddits and stuff, and then Twitter is doing whatever it's doing. It's not a great time to be marketing a game on social media. And so what we found was that participating in showcases ended up being a really great way to get people to notice. So we participated in this thing called Future of Play Direct, and they do these periodic live streams where they just show off a whole bunch of indie game trailers, and we just applied and sent them our trailer, and they included it, and a bunch of people watched and wish listed the game based on that. We also did one for Wholesome Games, which is these are just basically game curators. They basically just collect games that kind of are along a certain theme, and people follow these, and I don't know, maybe I'm old or something, but that was news to me. And so we participated in another one called Wholesome Direct. Same kind of thing, we just submitted to them, and they included our game trailer, which was super, super cool of them. And then what ended up happening is they also have curation on Steam, so you can like follow these curators on Steam, and anytime they do some sort of an event or something, we end up showing up in a couple of different places. I think games with demos. So like we showed up there because they're doing a thing right now. And the last one that we participated in that really, really helped was Steam Next Fest. So Steam Next Fest happens a couple of times per year. You can participate in one of them, and you should do it right before your game releases. But it's basically a place for you to showcase a game demo, and people can try it out, download the demo, and presumably we show up in like some of these subgenres. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in a Steam Next Fest, but what ended up happening from that is we got really great PR coverage, because a lot of gaming press is looking at this to see like what is going to be like the new indie thing coming up. And so we got a couple articles in like cool places like Rock Paper Shotgun. They wrote about us. We also came up in PC Gamer. Like, it was really, really cool to see like the impact that these showcases and Next Fest had on our wishlist numbers, and it went up to like 10,000 in like 2 weeks. I mean, we were expecting way less than that, and so it was kind of surprising just what impact that had in a time where social media was a dumpster fire.
Okay, I'm John, and I'm going to talk about good, bad games. And there's a lot of text in here, I'm just going to read it, but it's my rant on how to stop worrying if something is good and just have fun again. So, there's a lot of games out there, from loathed, like the infamous E.T., which is literally filling a landfill, as far as I know. Someone correct me on this, because it was so bad and they couldn't sell any of it. to beloved games like Zelda, which, you know, generally critics like, we all like. But lots of people will tell you what's good and what's bad, and some people will tell you things that are so bad that you dare not waste your God and country-given right to enjoy 100% of your precious time playing only perfect games that are worth playing. Because otherwise, in addition to wasting your precious time, you allow the devs to directly disrespect you, your family, friends, way of life, your moral values, and your favorite holiday, which they probably want to cancel after robbing you of 1999. So, are you subjecting all potential games to an FBI-level background check to ensure that the worst possible thing doesn't happen, and you buy or just play a game that isn't good? I'll play the world's tiniest violin for you because you had that experience. Stop doing it. What's going to happen? Are you going to get bored to death? At best, you're missing out on something fun, and at worst, you slowly allow the impossible standards you set for games to seep into every part of your life, alienating the people you love, turning you into a sad humanoid shell devoid of warmth and laughter. Congrats, you're now miserable. But I'm going to tell you how to stop doing that and just enjoy some, you know, bad games, and maybe why they're not actually that bad. So, this first one is a game called Gang Beasts. Has anyone played this? Okay, cool. So some people know what I'm talking about. It has a terrible name. That's like, it just does. Go to the Steam reviews and read it, and you might be horrified. It has clunky and suspicious controls. Suspicious because I don't quite know what they do. It's like sort of a ragdoll physics thing, but it really doesn't feel like you're in control. The graphics are kind of boring. The characters are hideous. The music is pretty uninspiring. There's incomprehensible grunts when you're selecting your character, which is very disturbing. Lots of bad reviews, also some good ones, and it's $19.99. Yeah, like premium indie game price right there. But guess what? I was forced to play this game with my nephew against my will, and I had hours of fun, and then went and bought it, because guess what? It's fun. Even though, you know, I would have never bought this game myself, probably. Oh my God, I make games. I know what a good game is. I'm not gonna play this, but hey. I was looking at the reviews, and this was interesting because I played this game after this was posted, but apparently it was even worse better. It was like even, you know, this person said like by trying to fix the problems, they made this game less fun. I don't know, something to think about. Maybe. I thought it's pretty fun, even at its like good worst. Okay, there's this other game called Goddamn the Garden. Has anyone played this? Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, this one's really weird. So, has a very confusing and alienating name. I think Goddamn is like the name of the garden, not like Goddamn the Garden, but like Goddamn the Garden. The graphics, you can see, they're pretty impressive to me, but like, if you see, it's in a jungle and it's very hard to understand what's going on. It's glitchy, uninspired AI. They have these spider enemies that basically run like straight towards you. The dialogue is hilarious if you're a 12-year-old boy, as you see in this picture. And it gets a lot worse too. It's very hard randomly. It's repetitive, and the critics that I read did not like this game. But I don't remember why I bought it, but I bought it and I was hooked. I played it all in one afternoon. It's not very long, a few hours. But somehow its weird vibe stuck with me the whole week, and it made me happy. I don't know. Maybe it's just because I had this experience and I knew other people probably wouldn't, but it felt special, and I think about this game a lot. So I don't know. Something to think about. Okay, bad game number 3. This is, maybe more people have played this. Who's played Getting Over It? Yeah. Oh, timer's over. Okay, so just gonna say that, these things about it, and it's a fun game. You should play it too.
Turn that off if you want to
So.
take another minute as I interrupted you.
No, I'm done, basically. Yeah, this game's about obstacles, and you get over it, and it's fun. And if you go play some bad games, and if you make one, I will play it, and possibly laugh.
All right, so my talk here today is going to be about how I overcame procrastination and fear of the unknown and just started doing game dev. So a little bit about me. I'm Alec. I'm a senior software engineer at Smile Direct Club. I graduated from Virginia Tech with a CS degree and a specialization in human-computer interaction. So game dev has always been kind of a fun hobby for me to do. I've been coming here for close to a year now, probably started about September, and I'm currently working on my first ever big game. It's a top-down action-adventure game similar to like Zelda or Death's Door, if you ever heard of that one. And I've created other little smaller games that aren't really worth mentioning at the moment, but so yeah. So I've always had a little bit of a problem when it came to game dev. I always just felt like I was never ready to make a big game, and big is in quotes because I'll get to that in a second. I would always do different tutorials. I would make these little tiny micro games, as I like to call them. I would do anything else to try to prepare myself for the moment where I could finally make my big game. And tutorials are great, but they're only ever going to get you like 90% of the way there. They never really are going to prepare you fully for everything you're going to face when you're creating your own game and working on something in the real world. And also, I was always dreaming very big. I had grand ideas for my AAA masterpiece that I was going to develop all by myself in about a year. And yes, everyone understands why that is a problem. So the first thing I wanted to say is I just started taking the leap. I just took the leap. I just started doing it. I said, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to make something. And I know that doesn't seem like super inspiring or anything, but that's what I did. I just got started with it. And you can actually learn a lot from just doing that, and I know I did as well. The next thing I did is I thought small, and then I went even smaller. So your first game that you make, like your first big game, isn't going to be a big game. It's not going to be some AAA blockbuster title, especially if you're working by yourself like me. So what you need to do is you need to start with a small idea, and then you break that down even further. And you can use like a Trello board or even just like a to-do list to keep track of all of those tasks. And each of those tasks that you break it down into should only take you like a couple hours to complete. If you're spending more time than that, you probably should break it down even further. It feels really good to check off a little box. It really does, and it will help you go forward in creating your game. The other thing I would do is establish due dates. And if you can find someone to hold you accountable to do it, if you can't hold yourself accountable, try doing that. One of the things I like to do is just keep myself accountable by having something to show at the game dev meetups on Sunday. Or if I have something to show, that really helps me. But so like this is my Trello board here. As you can see, I have a lot in the completed column. I still need to start fleshing out some more stuff, but I just follow that because I'm so used to that in the world of software development. Jira, woo. The next thing, prototypes. Totally fine, they're totally cool. Capsules and cubes are where it's at. So this is a current screenshot of what the game that I'm creating actually looks like right now. It's just a little capsule guy, a little capsule NPC, a little item pickup right there, and then a whole little conversation system I created in like one day of just sitting at the coffee shop. And what's funny is that it says this is a whole conversation you can actually read, and you can't read the word read. So obviously I have a little bit of work to do on that, but capsules and cubes, totally fine. Like that looks pretty acceptable in my eyes, at least, of something that I've created. It's better than a blank Unity scene. The next thing you want to do is you just want to revisit that plan every now and again. You always want to go back to your backlog or to what's in your future and make sure that you still need to work on what you're working on. And when you're selecting the next thing that you want to work on, I suggest alternating between the things that you do not like and the things that you do like. So that way, when you're working on stuff, you don't end up with a list of everything you hate that you have to do next, because then you'll never do those things. I still have a lot to do here, but I have come a very long way from having absolutely nothing. And it's just thanks to sitting down and starting to think about how to do things. But yeah, that's it.
Cool. Jesse Keogh. I'm a tech lead manager at Meta. I work in the Reality Labs division, used to be called Oculus. And I work on a product called the Interaction SDK. So I challenged myself to see if I could describe the thing I work on in 5 minutes. The ISDK is a production library that makes it easy to add controller and hand interactions to your MR or mixed reality or virtual reality experiences. And the types of inputs we support Our hands, so hand tracking for headsets that have the front-facing cameras where you can track hands. We offer interactions based on that. Your traditional VR controller inputs, and something we call controller hands, where we use the sensors and inputs on the controller to pose and animate a virtual hand. So if some of your players are on a hand track device and some aren't, you can have the same interaction model for both. What kind of interactions, you may wonder? Raycasts, we have pokes, so touching virtual interfaces with a virtual hand. And you can do things like poke limit, like do haptics, visual haptics to stop the finger on a surface and things like that. We also do grabs, including grabs based on the collider geometry, so you can pick up a chess piece based on the shape of that chess piece. And your traditional grab use, where if you grab a gun or a spray bottle in this case, you can trigger actions based on different poses. We also support locomotion in the form of teleport and snap rotate using hand gestures or controller buttons, transforming objects in 3D space, and then a couple of cool ones are we have a behavior tree, where's my guy? Behavior tree based pose recognition system, so you can build custom poses like the hands open, then closed, then the thumbs facing up, so that's a thumbs up. All right, gestures and more. Cool. Right now we are live in Unity, so if you get the Oculus VR integration package in Unity, it comes with our SDK. You can also assemble the Oculus SDKs piecemeal if you want some things but not everything. We're working on Unreal right now. And then in terms of platforms, we have really strong support for OVR, the Oculus VR plugin, and all the bells and whistles that come if you use the Oculus line of hardware. And then we also have support, just takes a little bit more configuration on your part for OpenXR, and if you want to use cross-platform or skeleton agnostic SDKs or bases for your VR interactions. Cool. If you've ever used an SDK for interaction before, you might be familiar with the Interactor Interactable model. iSDK uses it as well, where basically you set up interactors based on the types of interactions you care about. That would be like on your hand or a controller. And then your interactables, so your baseball or your squeeze bottle or your UI, are interactables that are configured based on the types of interaction you want that to receive. If you want to try it, we support some publicly released applications that we've built on top of iSDK to show you what it can do. One's called Firsthand. These are all in the Oculus App Lab. You can find them on the store if you want to use them. That one's also open sourced, so if you go to GitHub, I'll share these slides in the Discord and you can get the links. You can see exactly how we use iSDK, how you build gameplay on top of our SDK and all that. One that just came out about 2 weeks ago is called Move Fast. It's kind of a Beat Saber type rhythm game experience that showcases our improvements in hand tracking latency in V56 and V55 and V56 of the Oculus VR OS. Hand latency is greatly reduced, so we wanted to put together a sample that showcases that. And then of course our samples, the sample code comes with our SDK, but if you just want to play through them to get a feel of what's supported, you can also grab our samples app off of App Lab. Cool, if you want to use it, I've linked to our Getting Started page in the Oculus docs. There's also a 40-minute video here that walks through a bunch of our features, and that's it.
My name is Ben. I don't have a PowerPoint or anything because I'm just kind of winging it. But my talk is about limitations and how you can use them to your advantage in the creative process. So I started making games about 2 or 3 years ago, and I went through the whole, tutorials, like a million tutorials, just YouTube tutorials and coding tutorials. And it was pretty boring. But I didn't know how to make a game. I wanted to make a game, but I couldn't because I didn't know anything, so I had to do these tutorials, and it was pretty boring. And then one day, I was doing this tutorial by Jonas Tyroller, and he taught me some code about how to move.
I just want to add 2 more serial.
I meant to play that without audio, but we're winging it. He wrote some basic code on how to move a ball, and now we're watching an ad. Well, basically, he told me how to move a ball, And I started moving the ball, and I made a little obstacle course, and I was like, this is kind of like a game. So then a week later, it was around Christmas time, I had a 2-player, 1-keyboard, simple game about rolling a ball. And all I knew how to do was roll a ball, but it was kind of fun. And it was better than doing a tutorial. And I learned a lot, and I worked within my limitations because, if I could make Elder Scrolls 6, what would I do? I'd still be developing that now. But I could roll a ball, so I made this ball game. And then after that, I've heard this music way too much. After that, I made another simple game. This one took me like a month. And I did the same thing, pretty much. Like, fixed camera, but I knew how to apply forces to a ball, and I animated it. And I made like a little horror puzzle game. And it actually got a little bit of attention, like a few people played it on YouTube with, 10 subscribers or something like that. But it was really fun, and I learned a lot again. And I didn't know much to start, Like I wasn't thinking about what can I not do, but what can I do? And I just got started, and this is what I ended up with. And then after that, and there's like a whole jump scare noise. It's really scary. You guys would be screaming. After that, I made another game, and I didn't know how to use Blender, so every character's a cube. But it was kind of cute that way, and I made a little story and everything. And it's another game with a fixed camera perspective and just kind of forces applied on basic shapes. But just with only knowing that, just from this tutorial, which showed me this code about how to apply a force to a shape in Unity, over a few months, I had made 3 games with radically different art styles. I mean, basic Unity lighting, and in radically different genres. And I learned a lot. And if I had been thinking about what I can't do, then I would never have made anything. So in that way, it sort of informed my creative process, and made me make games, because I couldn't do much. So if you're thinking like, I really don't know how to make games, I can't do much, I think first look at what you can do, and then go from there. And then wishlist my game for God on Steam.
Okay, hi. So, I'm going to talk about Santa's Slip Up, which is a game that John and I did. So, I've alternatively entitled this, How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Process. Whatever that is for any of you. So like I said, I'm Nick. I'm no one important. I'm the heavy guy in the red coat. Does that sound like someone else? I don't know. You tell me. We're going to talk very quickly, like I said, about our game, about how it kind of worked with Ludum Dare. I'm going to talk a little bit about John in a good way, and we'll maybe talk about Christmas music if this will work. We'll find out. So here's the pitch. A humbug makes a Christmas game for a game jam. Then he asks another humbug to write Christmas music for it. This sounds like a setup for a comedy. It kind of is, mainly because I had to ask him specifically what he wanted for Jamness. And he looks at me, very straightforward. And that was the response I got. Jingle bells, man. Now, we were sitting at, for those of you that were there, we were sitting at Waffle House, and while he tells me that, and I'm kind of just like, thinking about this, he starts going into all the kind of the lore, if you will, behind Santa. Like, for instance, the fact that his like main assistant is what, Alabaster Snowball. Yeah. So in a lot of stories, Alabaster Snowball is the one that has the naughty and nice list, right? And so that ended up being the premise for the game. Was that you're Alabaster, you're chasing Santa while presents fall out of his sleigh, right? It's Alabaster's job once again to save Christmas. And so John's request to me for Jingle Bells was awesome because it was super clear, it was super deliverable. It kind of gave me some creative freedom, and because it was all of these things, it was perfect for someone who doesn't have a whole lot of experience writing for games yet. And I thought, perfect, this'll be the best way to do it. But this led me to a little bit of a conundrum and why it was actually terrible. It's because his request was super clear and super deliverable and gave me a little bit of creative freedom because Jingle Bells is technically in the public domain, so I can do whatever I want. Also, John kind of knows what he's doing. And I mean that as a compliment. So he started laying out game design document like we learned about last month, had one of those. And he laid out everything for me that he wanted me to do. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh no, this will not work. And we had some challenges because it's a game jam, right? Usually when you bring in kind of music and some of the sound effects, you bring people in a little bit closer to the end of the process, right? I'm here at the beginning, so there's no visuals. I personally don't have much experience having to mix down my tracks for listening on your iPhone, right? I know nothing of Unity. I used to try and run an older version of Unreal on an iMac I had, and I actually almost was able to fry an egg on it. It got so hot. So I have no experience with any of those tools. So think about that kind of made me a little bit worried. And so I figured that one bite at a time, that's how I have to eat the proverbial reindeer. Right? Slow and easy. And so I started with something I knew, and we'll see if it plays. Nope. Oh, come on. Anyway, so I started with what I knew, which is other Christmas carols, because John says to me, as he's writing all this code and whatever else, I need you to come up with music for the end game states, right? Come up with, you've found world peace because you got all the presents. You got most of the presents, so Christmas was saved. You missed a lot of the presents, so Christmas was ruined, and you missed all of them, so doom is upon the world. I said, cool, I can do that, so I start doing all my Christmas carols. And then he gives me the visuals. I'm like, cool, that's fine. Let's write some cheesy music, which Jingle Bells is cheesy anyway. And so when I ended up kind of doing that, I learned how cheesy I had to go. And it worked really well. And I'm happy to show that to anybody that cares. But these are the things I wish I had known, because I'm about out of time. There it is. But in conclusion, the things I wish I had known before I'd gotten into this project with him was how much fun I would have. For those of you that maybe haven't done a jam yet, which I don't think is many of us, but if you haven't, don't be afraid by the very narrow time constraint. It's super fun. I wish I'd known how stressed that I, and more importantly, John, would have had, because then me going into it and trying to have more of the attitude of fun would have been better. I wish I'd known more about Unity. I do know a lot more now about Unity and Unreal, and I wish I had known more about how to mix for this, but I did. So I learned all of those things, and no one cares. So Merry Christmas in July, everybody!
Make sure I'm video. Keep an eye out for Santa's slip-up coming Christmas of 2025. Wow.